my last two videos, I shared my plans for using leftover handspun from two different sweaters to make a scrappy stranded colorwork sweater. The easy thing to do would be to make a gauge swatch and go find a sweater pattern that matches the gauge and is something that I'm interested in knitting. And then I would just follow the pattern, plug in the colors whenever I felt like it. And that is a really great way to make a scrappy sweater. I've seen lots of scrappy sweaters done that way and they are gorgeous. But I like to do things the hard way, and that is starting from scratch, from designing my own stranded colorwork pattern to designing the shape of the sweater itself. So today we're going to talk about where that inspiration comes from and how to start taking inspiration to an actual sweater pattern that you can knit from. Hi, I'm Pamela from fibersprite.com, and I help fiber artists understand what they really need to know so they can get down to their real passion, actually working with fiber. When I'm designing a new sweater, I think about what I actually want to wear. I think about what designs I haven't seen online or in pattern books. I think about what designs I haven't seen in shops. Knitting a whole sweater is a really big investment of time, so I want to make sure that I'm going to get something, one, that I really want, and two, that it wouldn't be easy or efficient to get it somewhere else. I also really like to think about fit at the design stage. What is my favorite, most comfortable sweater at the moment? Is there anything about the fit of that sweater that I would change? Or am I looking for something that's a little bit more dressed up or a little bit more casual? How would that look? Those are all ideas that are sort of floating around in my head during the design stage. I also like to look at what's being shown on the runways. While I don't consider myself somebody who follows fashion really closely, I do want to make sure that I'm not going to be knitting something that's already, 2 years out of date by the time that I finish knitting it. So looking at runway shows is a really good way to kind of make sure that you're working with fresh inspiration. Most runway shows are showing something that is at least a year out, and honestly, it's going to be another year and a half or more before that is easily available. This year, when I was looking at the runway shows in January, what drew me in were lots of checks, plaid patterns, and a perennial classic is garments that play with the scale of the designs of the images. It's great to start off with a sketch of a sweater on an actual human body, and for that I really like to use a fashion journal. Now, these are kind of unrealistic. They're actually physically impossible to have a human being that looks like this. These drawings are scaled to be 12 heads, meaning that the head is 1/12 of the whole height of the body. Most human beings, even those super tall, super skinny models that you see on the runways, have a head that is 1/8 of their total height. So you can, alter the scale with a really high hairdo or really high heels, but that's only going to get you maybe to 1/9 or even 1/10 if you're dealing with something really extreme. So these are not meant to be an actual representation of how it's going to look on any human body, but it's nice to get the idea of a shape that matches a human form. If you do want to use something that's more true to life, I highly recommend My Body Model, which will actually take your own measurements and give you an outline of your figure so that you can sketch on your own figure. The reason why I'm using the Unrealistic Fashion Journal in this video is simply because it's easier for me to keep everything all in one place in this journal. I still have pages left in it, and it's just what I had on hand when I was designing my sweater. But I do highly recommend My Body Model for those more realistic images and sketches that help you imagine what something is going to actually look like on your body. The initial sketch that I have made would be really easy to work with as a basic sweater. It really only needs shaping around the neckline, the armholes, and any waist shaping that I might want to add. And drawing from that runway inspiration with these checks and that grid pattern, that would also be really easy to do as a stranded colorwork pattern. But it just doesn't feel like me. So I decided to combine this idea of checks as a trend with another idea that is kind of seemingly popular right now, and that is alligators. Alligators are apparently on trend for 2024 in the way that mushrooms and fairy gardens and other, little themes like that have been popular in the past. And I have sort of this animal theme going with the last few stranded colorwork patterns that I've knit. So the last one was oyster shells, and the one before that was the idea of snakeskin. So it's nice for me to continue that with this pattern. So I'm going to be doing an alligator, and fun fact, alligators have been totally randomly popping up in my dreams and in the news with those alligator sickles when it got really cold here in North Carolina earlier this winter. With that idea in mind, I went to Stitch Mastery. Stitch Mastery is the pattern chart editor that I use. It's very simple, it's very easy to use, it's a one-time purchase, which I really like. It's not something that you have to subscribe to. And I entered in my pattern based on the idea of alligator armor that would go all the way around their body. And I just learned that these are not called scales, but they're called scutes. This pattern looks like it's going to be a lot more fun for me to knit than just plain checks. As you go across the row, there are different scale sizes. So they're changing in their size across the rows. And that means I'll have to pay a little bit of attention, but I can put markers in to remind me of where I am. So that's going to be entertaining while I knit, and I think it'll be nice to look at as well. Once I have the inspiration and the idea and the sketch, I need to make this into an actual sweater pattern. And for a lot of people, this is kind of the hard part because, it's easy to have inspiration, it's easy to have an idea, but how do you actually implement that idea? It helps to have a really solid understanding of sweater construction. If you've never knit a sweater before, I don't want to discourage you. You could still absolutely design your own, but it does help to have knit a few sweaters before and understand the type of sweater construction that you like to do, the type of sweater design that you like to wear. And it does help to have a sketch first. Before I had done the sketch, I wasn't sure if I wanted a yoked sweater, a ski sweater, or a sweater with set-in sleeves. When you're working in stranded colorwork with a design, there are advantages and disadvantages to all three of these, whether it's the fit, or how it's knit, how easy it's going to be, or how challenging it's going to be. But once I had completed my sketch, it became really clear that this was going to be a sweater with a scoop neck and set-in sleeves. That means that there's going to be a little bit of a challenge at the shoulder and the sleeve cap, where I'm going to be knitting back and forth in stranded colorwork, and most people who work in stranded colorwork avoid the purl side at all costs. So it's a little bit of a challenge, but it's something that I've done before. I know I can do it. It's not a total deal breaker for me. Once I have that in mind, I'm going to go over to my sweater design books and look at kind of ideas for how I'm going to work with that construction. Is it going to be bottom up? Is it going to be top down? Are they going to be picked up set in sleeves? Or are they going to be done some other way? Sweater design books are really helpful, and these were what I relied on the most when I first started designing my own sweaters. Now I mostly use them for references. I am not currently designing my sweaters for multiple sizes. I'm only designing them for myself. That means that I'm not having to do extra math for the other sizes that you would expect to see in a sweater that has been published for purchase. So I'm just referencing these books and kind of getting an idea of, how wide should this spot be? How deep should the armhole be? Things like that. I do want to say that as much as I love all of my sweater design books and how much I appreciate all of the work that I know that the authors have put into them, I don't think that there's one perfect sweater design book. They're either going to promise you the moon, but you're going to have to do the math to get there, or they're going to have these overly simplistic designs that don't really fit, that need a lot of tweaking before they're going to be something that's comfortable and wearable and stylish. The one that I use the most is Knitting Pattern Essentials by Sally Melville. Honestly, it took me a long time to get used to how the math is presented in this book, and as a math-averse person, it was a challenge. When you're using this book, you need to go section by section of the pattern, and sometimes things are cross-referenced. in slightly confusing ways. You're going to have to do a lot of math. You're going to have to fill in a lot of blanks and hope that the math works out and try to mesh things together. But once you get the hang of it, once you've practiced with it, it starts to get a little bit easier as you go along. Of course, before you get too far into designing any sweater pattern, especially once you get into anything with stitch counts, you're going to need to have a gauge swatch and a schematic. In my next video, I'll share one of the shortcuts that I use to do both of those. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.